Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. This is Danny with episode number 279. Thank you for taking the time to join me on this next episode. Today I want to just offer a quick assessment and then hopefully reminder and maybe encouragement. Many of you, I'm sure, have felt either a combination or a portion or maybe all of the above to this feeling that I will get to. I know I personally have really all of the spectrum of these feelings, so it's probably not hard to imagine that this will resonate with many of you as you hear this. But I was thinking about this today, listening to something, and it kind of stirred me to this thought. And it's this idea of being heart sick, and I don't mean in the sense of necessarily a physical condition with your heart, like you would be sick with some kind of infection, but kind of a sickness of the heart. I think many times this, heart sickness, it starts out really, I think, and please at the forefront of this, I'm no, psychological, psychologically trained individual. So I just offer my thoughts, and they are just that, my thoughts. So just something to think on and consider. But I think oftentimes when we get in this place of heart sickness, it very often, for me even, starts out from this place of just disappointment. There may be something in your life that you're hoping for, or trying to reach for or attain to. Could be a career, job, family, friendships, relationships, your spouses, just anything that we encounter in our day-to-day life. Whatever place, country you find yourself in, listening to this. We all experience, these are human emotions. We are all humans, and as such, we have emotions that we deal with. Some of us, I think, deal with, emotions or aspects more than others. Depends on our personality, our attributes. So this all can vary quite a bit. But nonetheless, we all still experience certain types of emotions. And I think in this heart sickness, it oftentimes, especially for me, starts out in this place of disappointment. And whatever you're hoping for, reaching for, maybe it doesn't come to pass, doesn't happen, or that particular thing you're reaching for, it just doesn't pan out. And so you can find yourself in this place of disappointment. From that place, you could potentially find, a redirection, a change in something. Could have ended up better than what you were aiming for. I mean, there's a lot of variables and a lot of pathways that it could go from there. And so you may find yourself recovering from these moments of disappointment. But in some cases, that disappointment may kind of remain, and you may encounter these disappointments even, consistently. They may happen on a more consistent basis. And then it's a disappointment after disappointment after disappointment. And it gets to a place, if it's not redirected, it can get then to this next phase of discouragement. And these are all kind of my, this is just a progression that I have put together in my own thoughts. So I don't know in terms of, technicality, I don't know where all this lands, but this is just, kind of a personal assessment that I can relate to, and perhaps some of you may as well. But disappointment can then lead to discouragement from repetitive disappointments, and then we just find ourselves discouraged. And again, these things can continue to happen to us, and you may stay in that place, or you could get redirected and things could get better, or your situation could change. But if you stay in discouragement too long, then I think it can lead to the next progression, which is a place of weariness, becoming weary. And it's kind of this idea of, heavy laden. You are worn down from the weight of the disappointment that kind of bred discouragement. And so you find yourself weary, and as though your energy or your stamina, or the life force, if you will, in you find it to some degree fading or failing. And I think about Isaiah 40:29 says He gives strength to the weary. And just to also emphasize, I think, as we find ourselves in whatever spectrum or whatever stage in this progression, we ought to, and we should be, regularly seeking the Lord for His hand to intervene in our situation wherever we find ourselves, whether we're at the top of the mountain or the lowest valley. We ought to seek the Lord in celebrating the victories, but also trying to understand and seek Him all the more in those difficult times. So forgetting not the Lord in our victories, and finding that those weary moments in our life draw us even more back to the Lord. Now, sometimes, I know for me, I've been in those kind of dark places where you kind of want to withdraw into yourself and just avoid everything, even the Lord. I would urge you to resist that, and really implement just kind of a forced will of, I'm not going to do the thing that I desire, which is to withdraw. But if we stay in that place of being weary, we've become disappointed. That led to eventually our discouragement, and that continued discouragement led to weariness. And if not changed, then we can find ourselves in this place of despair. Now, 2 Corinthians 4:8, Paul had written, "We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair." Now, if you find yourself in a place of despair, you may read that and, you just kind of, sometimes you want to kind of scoff at it, because, you may even think, it must be nice. But it's very natural for us to find ourselves in a place of despair. Though also, it's not a place that we want to stay, and nor is it a place that we need to stay. It's unhealthy, it's dangerous, and it's not what God has for us. So we may have found ourselves, or have found ourselves before, in a place of despair, and if not then addressed or changed, that can lead to being hopeless. And Joshua 1:9 says, "Do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And if hopelessness or a state of hopeless continues to grow and multiply in our hearts, then we find, or we can find ourselves in this place of just wanting to escape. And this is a deep and dark hole. I've felt these feelings, and I'm sure some of you listening have as well. And it's just the weight of all of these things have grown and multiplied, and you just feel like you just want to escape it all. And if left untreated, or not given the proper, let's call it medicine, but I don't mean that necessarily in the physical sense. If not being treated correctly, it can lead to places that are irrevocable, that once decisions are made can't be changed. And so I would encourage you to, whatever place you find yourself in this, in my proposed spectrum or stage, to not lose hope, and to remember that that God is always eager and willing to reveal Himself more to you, more fully, more wholly, and more definitively every moment of every day. Psalm 147 verse 3 says, He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. For me, I've found a great comfort in the book of Psalms, especially if I find myself at any stage of these that I've mentioned: disappointment leading to discouragement, leading to being weary, leading to despair, leading to hopeless, and then ultimately wanting to escape. And, as you can imagine, that can take many forms, and even to the degree that a person may no longer be with us. And I found myself comforted and renewed as I read through the book of Psalms. And it's the book of Psalms. It's very an interesting book, because you will find many different shades of what you're experiencing there. Sometimes you'd be reading it for encouragement, and then you'll find David or other of the writers will saying they're kind of going through this dark night of the soul as well, and so at one point you think it's just kind of reinforcing your darkness, but then you find in it this kind of this ending crescendo of the majesty of God. And I think that's really the answer for wherever you find yourself and whatever problems you're going through. I think that's where we find relief, is we take the attention off of ourselves, off our situation and our circumstances. That's not to say that those aren't still there. They're real life, real world problems that we as a real person are experiencing. But we take our gaze off of those problems and we fix it upon the majesty of God. And I know personally, I've had some really dark days, and God has graced me with these moments of very fervent prayer. And as I am encountering Him in prayer, and I'm wanting to kind of give Him my laundry list of quarrels that I have or problems that I'm experiencing, and before I know it, I have kind of reassessed in the moment of prayer, and I find myself with nothing to say. It's as though my problems just kind of melt away in the moment of, being um, with him, if you will, face to face with him. Your worst day, standing before the presence of God suddenly doesn't even matter. And that's not to say either that, you know, when I come back to reality, if you will, that I don't end up having to, reface the situations. Yes, but um, there is something that is, um, there's just something that happens when we put our gaze upon Him, how it changes our perspective of the situation that we're facing. So, if you haven't discovered the um, the the grace of, if I could, the grace of the Psalms, then I would encourage you to, play, the audio, play audio of the Book of Psalms as you're driving to work, or listen to them as you work, and just, soak up the encouragement of what they provide. Um, that really is, I think, one of the best things that you can do, in the sense of, um, feeding or nourishing your soul, your heart. Um, when we think of this place of, being heartsick, if we think of it in the sense of the natural, anytime a person is sick, there's, a doctor that assesses the situation, and then there's a treatment plan, there's a treatment approach. I think the same is true for the spiritual component. If our heart is sick spiritually, or our soul, we're in this crushing state of disappointment or discouragement, despair, hopelessness, escape, whatever it is. We have assessed our situation, and now we need a treatment plan. We need a regimen to go through. And if I was your spiritual doctor, I would prescribe you, to fill yourself with the Book of Psalms, to fill your heart with that, and then to maintain this, steady state of prayer, and with the hope that your prayer would transform into more than, here's a list, God, of my problems. So He's perfectly willing and capable to hear those things, and eager to hear them. But I would hope more that you would have just an encounter with His presence, and your eyes would be so fixed in His gaze that your problems suddenly just melt away in the moment of your intimacy with God. And that's completely possible, because I have encountered that very thing, and many times. Now, sometimes that doesn't happen in my prayer life, and so don't be discouraged if it doesn't for you, but it absolutely can. And so I would encourage you to, in your prayer life, seek His presence and engage with Him in such a way that, before you know it, these things are just melting away. But it is important, I think, if your heart is sick, do you feel the need to escape or to quit, to encourage you that joy will come. There's the story in the Bible of Saul, and he was told not to offer a sacrifice, that the prophet would do that, and it was just at the last moment, in Saul's place of fear, his army is running away, and all hope seems lost, and so he offers the sacrifice himself against the command of the Lord, and then the prophet returns just as he had done so, and from that. He experienced great loss because of his disobedience. So, oftentimes it's just beyond the place of loss and disappointment that we can then experience breakthrough. And what a tragedy it is to know that relief was coming just on the other side of obedience. So I would encourage you to just remind yourself that joy will come, and to, in these places, whatever stage you find yourself in, to feed and to nurse your heart. Just like a sick patient, nurse your heart to health. Feed yourself with the Psalms, with spending time in His presence with Him, and worshiping Him. And I think that in doing those things, you will find yourself greatly relieved and out of these harmful, detrimental stages that we can find ourselves so easily entangled in with just all the cares of life. I hope this gives you encouragement and some advice, if you'll let me be your spiritual doctor, and I hope it's encouraging and gives you some additional strength. And just pray that the Lord would mightily show Himself to you in your life, that He would transform your situations, the things that you're reaching for, that if He doesn't want you to have them, I pray that He would just change your heart, your perspective over and for those things, and that if it is something that He plans for you, that either He would open the door to it, or He would make it clear to you that this is for a later time, and that's not necessarily for now. So I just pray that God would show all those things to you, that He would intervene in your situation and give you joy for mourning, and that you would be greatly encouraged. So thank you so much for being with me on this episode. I look forward to the next one. God bless.